how do you create the conditions for a team to be creative?
You let the people know that you know what they're thinking, and then it builds a connection.
The power of spontaneity, the power of giving.
And I'd say the groove is found at the crossroads of discipline, surrender, and mischief.
How come they've never heard of it?
Hi, welcome to the Signature Leadership Show, where we discover world-class leaders' skills and strengths so we can see those within ourselves. Today, I am thrilled to present Tom Morley. Tom, following his time in the music business with the 80s band Scritti Politti, Tom has developed a truly artistic way of living where every experience leads him to the humorous, uncovering some universal truth. He turns his disasters into successes, into stand-up comedy for conferences, audiences for over 40 years. First behind a drum kit and then being the multi-talented frontman for whole troops of performers earned him the name the Rockstar Activator. Tom, welcome to the show.
Thanks very much.
It's a pleasure to have you, and I appreciate your time. I found it really inspiring about how you adapted in a predicament where a lot of speakers like me and others were trying to figure out what the next step is. And the other thing that I've been inspired by you, and I'd love to hear your take on it, is your style of presenting is you're speaking to the heart, you're speaking to the emotions, you're really getting people out of their comfort zones. You're bringing a holistic approach to team development and team building within a corporate environment. Why does it matter within a corporate environment?
Well, I mean, there's a macro and a micro to that. The macro is look at the world and look what logic, protocol, compliance, top-down leadership, parallel process, moody CEOs who make billions and keep it rather than distribute it. Look what that's done to the world. So we're not in the best position. Let's put it that way. And yet, what did people do in COVID? They got addicted to box sets. They did all sorts of creative things. So creativity, I mean, it was a paradox. Creativity was really important to them. And yet they were saying, let's not fund the arts. They can work it out. It's what they've done for centuries. And it was one of the biggest challenges. And we came through it. But creativity now, if you ask any CEO, what do they want? Do they want compliant people like the Industrial Revolution who just leave the land, come and learn to do one thing on a production line, take the money, buy their products? They don't want that. I mean, it's not working. So creativity, it's not even a revolution. It's just an evolutionary necessity. It's like we have to do it. So consequently, myself and my peers, colleagues, other people like me, I don't even know some of them, but I see what they're doing. What we have now, I think, is essential. I mean, you look at anybody, Simon Sinek, or all those people, Sir Ken Robinson, influencers, they just say, yeah, we maybe we needed that 100 years ago, that compliance and that regulation. That's not doing us any good anymore. I mean, everybody says it. And the higher up you go, the more they will say it. I kind of get at live events, the lower echelons of people who book me say, Tom, we can't move the furniture, we can't move the chairs, we can't do that, we can't. And I go, well, you'll connect better if we get all the furniture out of this room. We form two concentric circles, and I'm in the middle. Get me a decent mic, and I'll bring everybody together, and I'll have the space to do that. They go, we can't do that, Tom. I go, well, funnily enough, I spoke to your CEO in the bar 15 minutes ago, and he said, great, do what you want, I trust you. So now I go, oh, all right, everybody, we're moving the furniture. It's like, so it can be done. but you have to, or I have to go to the top now very often to action that, and I do it because that's what I'm booked to do. I'd have a much easier life if I didn't have to fight with people at every venue I go to actually create the conditions where they get the kind of optimum from the experience. And then sometimes I don't. Sometimes I just go, all right, it's kind of gonna work. So I'll let you have what you want. But I leave with a lighter heart if I've stood up on a chair in the middle of a whole bunch of people who are shouting health and safety. I go, do you know what? I grew up falling out of trees after climbing them. Don't tell me I can't stand on one chair so the people at the back can see me.
Well, you've come from a highly creative and collaborative background as a musician.
Yeah.
And I
Yeah.
see you as a Renaissance man. I think you're more than a musician. You are an artist in every aspect of the world and word.
Yeah.
You talked about something that interests me, and I'd love to hear your take on it, because I think there's some crossover with what I do in a different sphere, because I came from the world of comedy on the fringes, and also the work I do with team building and collaboration on a deadline. Is you talked about the importance of creating the conditions for you to be creative, and in essence to create a creative environment for people who say they want to be creative and actually get them in that space. How do you create the conditions for a team to be creative?
Well, there's two things about that. First of all, the space, I always say, the environment you book is the first facilitator. So when people walk in, do they think we're really being looked after here? They've really invested in us. The food was good. Getting our tags was easy. Or do they come in and go, oh, we could have done this at the office. Why have they spent all that money when this place isn't even very good? So that's one thing. But regardless of the space, the reason I get people standing up is there is a neuroscience to it, and there's a different, even just standing up at a business meeting is different. And getting them moving, as I've described, gets things going in them just a little bit. And also I say to them after a couple of minutes, I say, can you just turn to at least two people and say, I don't like doing this sort of thing. And then they do it. But they do it really genuinely. You see that they can't wait to say that, but they do it laughing, And then I say, all right, well, that's got that over with. And then a bit later, when they're into it, I say, all right, can you just say to someone next to you, I thought this guy's a real idiot at first, but he might even know what he's doing. And then they do that. So I'm always a little bit ahead of them, like any stand-up comedian is. You let the people know that you know what they're thinking, and then it builds a connection. So I begin as this person they hate. I know that because of the way I look. They don't want to, half of them don't want to be there anyway. They're so stressed. So let's get that over with. Or I just go on and go, all right, is anyone else having a bad hair day? And then they laugh. They go, oh, he knows we were judging him about his hair. So my job really is to build trust. And even if I've got something that I say that is normally funny, but it just doesn't work with this audience, I just say, do you know what? That normally works, that joke. I'll tell you what, just for my benefit, because I'm used to hearing a laugh there, could you just laugh for me? If I'm going to count 4. 1, 2, 3, 4, and then laugh. And then they laugh. I go, oh, that worked. I'm feeling better. Can you do me one more thing? I'm going to count to 4 again. And can you laugh and can you slap someone on the back as long as, they're all right with being touched? And then they laugh again. They slap, and then they go, oh, thanks very much. All right, so let's carry on. So even if I don't get the laugh in the place I'm expecting, I make sure I get it anyway, because it's not, I'm pretending it's for my benefit, but it's because I want so many laughs per minute in a way. So someone, well, this happened to me quite often. People said that was like stand-up comedy with drums or stand-up comedy with singing. And then one of my favorite comments was, yeah, we just seemed to laugh for an hour, and by the end of it, we could play drums. How did you do that? And I just go, I don't know. I just sort of make it up as I go along, but it's very carefully monitored, and I do that. I do it out of professional pride, but also I do it in a bigger way because I want those people to go away trusting themselves more connected, more open in their hearts and in their imaginations, so they'll make better decisions within the company, for the company and for the world and for themselves.
Yeah, and what I love about this too is you're bringing in the arts through movement, through sound, through comedy. There's a feeling of spontaneity. In some ways, it's more real than something that is polished. The real world's in movement. There's constant change. We don't know what's going to happen in the hour. Forget about tomorrow, especially in the world we're in now with so much uncertainty. So your approach is getting people into places of their heart and their soul, connecting with each other that they might be numb to. And you cut right to the core of that, even if you find some resistance at the beginning in their work, in their home. There's a very analytical, almost cold distance within themselves, and you're trying to get them to reconnect to themselves. Let's
Mm.
go backward for a moment, because your
Yeah.
background is really intriguing and in context to this conversation. You said it's as if like they feel like you're just making it up, but it's
Mm.
very systematic and intentional. And
Mm.
oftentimes I think the best presenters look spontaneous and they look natural, as if they're just making it up on the spot. But that's 20, 30, 40 years of talent, of taking hard knocks and getting that to that place where it looks masterful. He says in a minute he can draw the perfect shape or the perfect animal, and he said, well, that takes 10 years to do that shape. Let's go back to your past as a musician. I just want to start
Mm-hmm.
off with, where did you first gain this love for music?
That's a good question, because I grew up thinking I was going to be an artist. I was very good at art at school, and my mum wanted me. We were a poor family, but she saw I had this graphic potential. You'd be interested in this with your signatures and making the signature beautiful, or just making a line beautiful. I had that ability. I was always getting awards at school. I was very shy at school, but with pictures, I shone, because I didn't have to speak up or anything. I could just draw a picture and hand it in under the cover. And they go, "Whose is this picture?" I go, "It's mine." So I was going to be an artist, and then my decision to be a musician. I mean, I always liked music. I was lucky. I was born in 1954, so I grew up in the 60s with the Beatles, Flower Power, Mark Bolan, Pink Floyd, Jimi Hendrix, and that. So I had all these influences, Janis Joplin, all incredible influences, Joni Mitchell. And I went to the Isle of Wight Festival in 1970, hitchhiked down there when I was still at school. And I saw all those bands. And of course, it's actually quite hard for me to imagine now what it's like to grow up without a pervading pop culture, with a philosophy, with experimentation, with seeing groups kind of expand, for want of a better word, expand their consciousnesses together. And it's reflected in their clothes, in their songs, in their album covers, in their concerts, as they get more and more kind of extravagant. We had to deny we liked all that when we became punks in the late 70s. But actually, that was an amazing influence. But I think specifically when you talk about music, I'm going to jump a bit to being in the band. And we used to make in the early days, we used to make half our songs up on stage. So in terms of the fear that you're talking about in people, or the cut-offness, which I would say is because of fear of expressing themselves and being ridiculed, in making songs up on stage, we weren't musical geniuses at all. We weren't that accomplished musically, but we knew each other really well. We lived in the same house. We talked about the same books, drank in the same pubs. We had a kind of entourage of people who we thought of. Really, we thought the band was about 15 people, and we happened to be the three people who got on stage and expressed what we talked about all the time. We were just, the voice. But what used to amuse me was people go and see jazz bands expecting them to improvise, but not pop bands or indie bands. People would say, at first they would shout out for the songs they liked, they'd heard on the radio or something. And then after a while, they got used to our style and they'd shout out, make one up. And we go, all right. So that was the request. It wasn't play that one that we really like, that we know really works. It was make one up. And then we would get applauded exactly the same if it went well or if it kind of collapsed on stage. Didn't matter. That what mattered to them was that we were brave enough and we represented courage, spontaneity, imagination, all those things that people want in their lives, but they're a bit scared of in case they get laughed at. There we were, doing it on stage, and I mean, not getting paid much for it, but getting paid for it, and kind of representing a new way of being in the music business, which is very different to the one I just described of, pomp and ceremony, and it all got, I remember seeing Emerson, Lake and Palmer out the Isle of Wight, and they had cannons on stage for one song, which they fired these cannons, had to be at a certain point in the rhythm, of course.
What did you learn about developing a mindset of spontaneity in those early days of developing a successful band that could teach us to bring it into our lives today, whether it's work or at home?
Well, I think if there's any word that sticks out, it's authenticity, because if you're authentic, people will forgive you every mistake. You see it on chat shows all the time. People say, can you do that thing that you do? And they try it and they get it wrong. And then people go, hooray, they got it wrong, or they try an accent and it goes a bit wild, or they swear by accident or something, hooray, don't worry, we'll bleep that out. So it's, people love authenticity because they feel it, and it reminds them of vulnerability, the vulnerability they feel that they're scared of expressing. Here's someone. So we learned that in our making songs up on stage, we learned that as long as, like I say, the important thing that I learned from that was you get the same applause, whether it goes well or not. What you get applauded for is I know there's a kind of maverick irreverence to it. It's saying, are these the rules? We know the rules. We could get everything dead right. We could play the album start to finish, track by track. Who wants that? That they want, I think we'll make one up now. And what style do you want? Kind of reggae. And I tell this story in my book that a pivotal moment for me was in a gig in Berlin when we're playing. It was all going well. People, art center, it's all beautiful. Drinks tokens in our pockets. About half an hour to go. Great. And there was a power cut. Everything went down. All the amps went off, lights went off. And at that point, I thought, because I was a drummer, I thought, well, I've got a choice here. I can either write a stiff letter to the venue saying, we're never coming to your establishment again, or I could just keep drumming. So I just kept playing, and the crowd, I was playing a reggae beat, the crowd set up Bob Marley chant, yo, 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 yeah. And they set it up with themselves. Some people did the call, some people did the response. So I just carried on playing. And then someone found a fuse, replaced the fuse. All the lights came up, power came on, and the other members of the band, Green and Neil, came in with me, bang on. They'd been listening, and the place was in uproar. It's yay! And someone asked me at the bar afterwards. They said, "Do you always do that power cut trick? Because it really worked in connecting the audience and connecting us to you." And I said, "No, actually, it was real." They couldn't believe it was real because, but those things that customize the event, and like I say, it could be a mistake on the chat show, or it could be a joke between two people on a chat show. Did you go for that part? I went for that part, and you got it. I never knew that. That's what they want to hear. All right, I'll tell you one thing about this is that I was doing a roadshow, a European roadshow with a company, and I thought we were going by bus, but when I got to the meeting place, they said we're going by plane. We've got a private plane as part of our company, and we're going to use it. So we flew from place to place, but across the channel, going from London to Paris, where our first gig was, I explained to the CEO, who I didn't know. He said, "Tom, you and I better have a conversation. I have no idea why you're on this plane." And I talked to him about the spirit of Ubuntu. I'd recently come back from South Africa, and Ubuntu means I am because we are, and it's very much we have to work together. So I talked to him about this, and he said, I remember coming into land in Paris, and he said, "All that you've told me about Ubuntu, that's true, isn't it?" And I said, "Yeah, it is true." He said, "If I Google it, what you've told me about Nelson Mandela and everything," yeah, I said, yeah. He said, "All right then." And he picked up his PowerPoint script. It was quite dramatic. He said, "You're sure?" And he said, "Sure." And he called his assistant over, his PA. He said, "All right." And he ripped it in half in front of us both. He said, "We're going to do the rest of this tour around Ubuntu. I'm not going to use any PowerPoint, not going to use any slides. Watch." He said, "When we get there, I'm just going to take my jacket off." And he said, "You said you want people in a circle? We're going to tell them ahead. We want you to circle up the chairs. We're not, that's how we're going to do it." And we went from place to place. And he said, there might be a place we're going. He said, "They're always difficult there." And when we got there, the word had got ahead. And as we arrived, they'd watched one of the videos that we'd made on a previous bit of the road, and they'd learnt the song we sang. There was an African song. They'd learnt it, and they were singing it to us in harmony as we arrived. So I think there must have been something on that plane trip that, he wasn't looking for an answer. He had his answer in his PowerPoint, and everything was scheduled. But luckily, and that's why I said it's good if I can get to the top, someone at the top will have the imagination to go, "Okay, it looks like we can't lose." Or if we do whatever we lose, we're going to gain double. Because there were some people who would have preferred PowerPoint, but they needed to learn that life isn't PowerPoint. We became our own PowerPoint. That's what he said.
I like that lesson of you became the PowerPoint. It's about co-creation. It's so easy to get lost in, I need to give everything and not give the audience any space to project their own hopes, their own beliefs, their own spirituality onto art. And I remind myself of that too, is how can I make space to let them make sense of this on an emotional level and also practically? Can we stay in this? You talked about your book. Can you share with us another story from that book that comes to mind when you have been at your best? What's an example you can share of a story of how you've adapted in a powerful way from your book, or just a story that really stands out to you?
There was one where we used to live in another place in Fulham, and I've always got a drum in the house, and I looked out of our window and I saw our neighbour's daughter, Elena, in the garden looking a bit sad. And I know Elena, she's, quite thoughtful. And I went out with my drum and I said, Elena, can I play you a song? We know the song called Imela, and I'm going to put your Imela's a Igbo word from West Africa, Nigeria. And I said, I'm going to put your name in instead of Imela. I'm going to sing Elena. So I was singing Elena, Elena, Elena. And then Dawn came out and started singing the harmony. Elena, Elena. So we're singing and she was a little bit taken aback, but she was really, she loved it. And then her dad came out and he was working for The Independent on Sunday. It's a paper. And I said, and I thought, I might get a job out of this. So I said, look, sometimes if I take the rhythm of a company's name and then I play it and it kind of customizes it. So I said, The Independent on Sunday, I actually use. So I started playing this. Yeah, very entertaining. Our people wouldn't go for it, I'm afraid. But he said, but I do know a small publishing company called Pegasus that a friend of mine runs. He said, they'd like a little thing. And I thought, it's not really what I was after. And he said, they probably haven't got any money. So, but anyway, I kind of dug myself into this. Yeah, sure. Yeah. I've got the drums in the car. It's only a little thing. So I went and did this team building thing with Pegasus. And about 3 months later, the phone started ringing. And people would say, we've read about you in BA's In-Flight magazine. Could you come to a meeting? Sounds brilliant. And it had gone so well with his little team. I didn't know he published BA's In-Flight magazine. So, and he got his art team to make this picture of me, or not exactly me, but half me, half businessman with a tie, drum, headband. It was nice graphic. So consequently, from doing that free little gig, I got into BA's magazine. I tell you, our company was called Instant Teamwork at the time. Man, we just got so much work out of that article because it was like a captive audience for 6 hours flying across to America. And then when I got back, and also we sponsored families in South Africa. I thought, I can't make all this money from an African song, Imela, without paying something back to Africa. So we sponsored an orphanage. We got them a water pump, water tower. They built their own garden and all this stuff. So when I got back, one of my competitors said, BA Flight Magazine. He said, I've hired all sorts of PR people. I've written all sorts of press agents. I've never even got a look at it. How did you do that? And I said, well, I don't know anything about PR. I just sang a song to our neighbour's daughter. And he said, I never tried that. So I said, no, they don't teach you that at Harvard Business School. But so that's it. My life, and the reason I wrote the book, really, my life is full of those examples of doing very often seeing no benefit in doing something financially, but thinking, well, this would be good for them. They'd enjoy this, or there's a. I mean, if there's one thing I learned from my family who were poor, it was generosity of spirit, and you often see this in poor people. They're much more generous with the very little they've got. There'll be people throwing things at the screen. That's not true, but I see that a lot. And so I like that generosity of spirit, and I much prefer to follow that than some logical step-by-step LinkedIn expert, do this and you'll get that. It's all nonsense to me. I'm sure if you have that kind of mind, you can leverage it, but I have many stories like that, things I've done. I even paid to do a gig once, and I got all sorts of opportunities out of that, which I didn't expect. And they paid me back, I would say, 100-fold. And I'm not exaggerating when I say 100.
Thank you for sharing that. And that idea of generosity of spirit, about a magnanimous presence. When I'm fully conscious of coming from a place of reciprocity, and not transactional, where someone wants to connect, or like you said, someone asked for my help, and I just feel it's the right thing to do, and I do it, and I expect nothing in return, and I feel that I already have everything in my soul that it needs. I have all the wealth, all the love, all the security that my heart desires. It's in that place that's not contrived, but I actually feel that way, where something shows up in my life that was unexpected, and for you just to kind of go in that direction and kind of go with the flow. One of our themes of this conversation is about the power of spontaneity, the power of
Mm,
giving, of yourself.
mm,
It
mm.
just took you in this place that you could have never expected, and yet it did come full circle, and it did help you in a way you never could have imagined.
Yeah. And I think there's a formula to that, which I think Mihai Csikszentmihalyi hit upon in his book Flow, where he said flow is found at the intersection of discipline and surrender. And I love that. And I thought there's something, for me though, there's something missing. And I'd say the groove is found at the crossroads of discipline, surrender, and mischief,
Oh,
because I think there's a certain amount of mischief involved for artists, especially. I mean, if you look at them, you mentioned Picasso earlier on. Picasso, if he got a bill and it was a high bill for some building of a studio extension or something, he'd hand it over to the builder, and then he'd say, "Oh, hold on a minute," and they'd just do a little sketch on the back and sign it, Picasso. So, of course, that check was never paid into the bank because the builder went away with a signed Picasso. So that's the mischief, because it's like uh, all right, I'll give you what you want, but here's a little thing. So I love that, because he would, obviously he had the money. He wouldn't have missed the money, but so you're just sort of playing with life, saying, I know your rules, and I'm just going to intervene a little. And that mischief, it's crucial. And in terms of, I was watching a thing online about Jim Carrey, and also Dawn was watching the Truman Show the other night, and I watched a few bits of that. And he gets really mischievous towards the end when he suspects he's being watched. He does all of these things. And yeah, what are we thinking? We're not saying, no, Truman, that's not very sensible. We go, yeah. And you even see the crowd in the bar going, yeah, come on, Truman. And what do we like in movies? The whole thing. I mean, Hollywood is based on discipline, surrender, and mischief. It's not based on discipline. And it's not just based on discipline and surrender, because that's just boring. What do we like? We like the fool. We like rom-coms are only funny because things keep going wrong, and they keep having to reconnect and reinvent ways to get in front of each other or get away from each other.
and that example, which I think might be my new mantra for 2024, discipline plus surrender plus mischief equals
Yeah,
a life well lived. Jim Carrey, who grew up not far from me, had a very
yeah,
challenging uh, early life. His father was relatively successful, I think, middle class, and lost his job, and then lost his spirit because of it. And
yeah,
Jim Carrey was going from trailer park to trailer park because of that. And his
yeah,
discipline was that he never gave up on his goal. He went around Hollywood Hills and had visualized that he was going to one day become a world star. Now, this is
mm,
an extreme example. Other people might do this and might not have the same results, but he had the discipline
mm,
to visualize that goal. He wrote it on a check that one day I'm going to make $10 million. And then when his father passed away, what did he do? He took out the check that his father had given him, and he placed it in his gravestone. He buried it with him. And Jim
wow,
Carrey was named the highest paid comic actor, I think, of all time, when his first check
Yeah.
for Ace Ventura was $10 million. That sense of surrender that you get, and also he never lost that sense of humor. There didn't seem any bitterness in him in the early days, in Living Color, in these, when he wasn't on top of the world. There's a sense of joy and in uninhibition.
Yeah, yeah, and complete dedication to mischief. I mean, there can be very few mischievous comedians as he is, and again, that's so attractive to people because they think, I wish I could be like that. I just haven't quite got the courage. Maybe they get a bit of courage from it. I mean, most movies you walk away from thinking, yeah, I'm kind of on top of the world now.
Let's stick with this phrase, which I love, which I'm gonna copyright to you now. Discipline plus surrender plus mischief equals
Yeah.
success on multiple levels in life. How did David Bowie exemplify what we just said, or not, when it comes to discipline plus surrender plus mischief?
Yeah, I think he represented it completely because he had all the discipline of early musicianship and really crafting his songwriting skills and his persona. I mean, in a way, he was one of the first rock stars in a generated way because he would stage manage arriving at a hotel. He'd have his limo and have his manager, helpers, da da da. And he wouldn't pay any attention to the press. He'd sweep through. It'd be like a performance, up the stairs to his room. Consequently, the press were gagging to interview him and get photographs of him and get some personal time with him. So consequently, when he decided, all right, I'll do a press thing. I'll talk to the press, or I'll do interviews. He had them in the palm of his hand. So, but that was a real discipline of, okay, I've studied the music business, the rock business, the press, how you do it. I'm going to disrupt it, but I'm going to change it in my favor. So that's the discipline. The surrender, I would say, was in some of his writing technique, which he learned from William Burroughs, where it's called cut up. You probably know. I don't think I've got an example here, but if you get 2 pages, right? No, you get 1 page, and it's got 2 columns in it. That's one column of text. That's another column of text, and you cut up. You take the end of that line to the beginning of this line, the end of that line, beginning of that. It's how Burroughs wrote some of his poetry. David not only did that, but he devised an early computer program that would do it for him as well. So there's a real surrender in that, because then you put that out as a lyric and you sing it with passion. But actually, it doesn't mean anything. But so you have to. But you can't explain that on a record sleeve. You can't say to an audience, "Forgive me if this doesn't make sense." So if you listen to some of his work, you think, "What that line? What is that line?" But it's kind of, he sang it with such passion. You think, well, it means something to him. So you take it on. So I love that kind of surrender. That's similar to going and doing a gig for free and not knowing if anything's going to come from it, or hitchhiking and saying, I don't care where I go, I'll just go where the driver's going. It's that sort of thing. And the mischief for him, I think, was he was at the top of his game with one image, like Ziggy Stardust or something. You go, I'm changing now. I'm going to be Aladdin Sane. Oh, you like Aladdin Sane? I'm going to be the Thin White Duke. Oh, you like the Thin White Duke? I'm going to do a soul album in America called Young Americans and employ black soul singers to work with me. And being the thin white man. So he kept, and again, I think he represented the mischief that we all want to have. We all want to change. We all want to be Madonna, the material girl, and then Madonna, the Vogue, super sophisticated, the vamp leaning on a lamppost like Greta Garbo smoking a cigarette. So I remember we were doing some hand claps on a track, and he taught me this part. I thought it's going to be quite easy, hand claps. Who can get them wrong? It's just on 2 and 4, but it was this quite complex thing. And I remember I got one beat wrong, and he's just all right, back to the top. And I remember he looked at me, he said, "Here, this is how it goes again. You got it?" And he just kind of winked with this kind of glint. And but what that meant was, I knew it. That if I didn't get it right this time, he was just going to do it. He was just going to double track it himself. So it's like, you want to be in my track? You're going to get this right. Yeah, sure. And I got it exactly right. So there's and that was a kind of mixture. It was a mixture of the whole thing. The discipline of, I'm a percussionist. I can learn something fast. The mischief of, okay, we'll do it together. We've never done this before. And the surrender of, okay, I'm not going to do this with logic. I'm going to do it with feel. And I'm going to do it because we're looking at each other across the mic. And, I can trust. We got vibe. I'd rather trust the vibe than trust the mathematics that are quickly calculating in my head. Get this right. But he just lived that. And all those people. I don't know if you've seen. There's do you know the artist Tom Jones, singer Tom Jones from Wales? He's quite old now. He used to have his show, the Tom Jones Show, and he was always like this, I'm super sexy, I'm super powerful, I've got my band, got my show, I'm at the top of my game. And he had Janis Joplin on, and they did the soul song. It's on YouTube, and she's got her band with her, and she is going for it, but purely just as she always did on stage. And you see Tom Jones struggling to keep up, and she's whipping her band up. Yeah, come on, and she's and he's there doing this sort of standard moves, this Tom Jones moves, and you can see on his face, man, this woman's ahead of me. Where he's really not used to it. But the mischief in her case is, I'm just going to do the best show here for the audience. I'm not worried about whether he's feeling uncomfortable or not. So I think there's an element of it, which is, it's a bit like Catch Me If You Can. There's an element of mischief, which is, I've been doing this a long time. It's like the fool in the court of the king or the queen, with all the barons and all their pomp and ceremony and land, and all their backup troops. And the fool is running rings around them because the fool can. And it's not because of the costume, it's because they've done their homework. So there's an element of it's not technical homework. It's you have to have a couple of breakdowns in order to be a proper fool. Go through the dark night of the soul and come out the other side. I mean, there's still times now I earn well, but my income is so, what's the word, feast and famine. Probably about a month ago, I was at the supermarket and I had cards. I didn't have any cash. No cards work. Everything was out, or there was some trouble with it. I had to go around the supermarket, putting everything back on the shelf, with the security man following me. And I was dressed like this, right? And I had a very ornate, expensive hat. And here I am. I can't afford anything. I've got to put it all back and leave. But I remember doing that, and I was thinking, if this was important to me status-wise, I'd feel really humiliated. But I thought, I'm enjoying this lesson because I don't need anything. I've got water in the tap at home, and there's probably enough food in the fridge for 2 days. I'm absolutely fine. My wife was away, and then I don't know, some money came in from somewhere. But I think you've got to live on that edge to be properly mischievous, because life was being mischievous with me and saying, okay, You think you're so great? Let's say you live with nothing for 2 days, except a key in your pocket. And I still felt like a king compared to most people in the world.
What I hear from that, I wrote down mischief is a combination of inhibition, experience, courage, humility, and egolessness. Maybe not full lack of ego. I've known many actors, is that I heard that acting school, they spend the first year learning to relax in front of the camera, to relax on stage. And this is what I've seen, whether it's Sammy Davis Jr., even watching you in the clips that I've seen of yours, to get to a point of to be uninhibited. What am I like with my kids? What am I like with my late grandmother, who I could be myself? What does that level of
Yeah.
authenticity mean, where I feel no inhibitions? I'm not self-conscious. What does it really mean to be mischievous? Because someone watching this, a CEO or a business leader, they might tune out a little bit and say, you know what? I'm like, are you telling me I should be funny? Because when I think mischievous, I think it's silly. There's a deeper authenticity that accompanies that particular trait, which we don't usually talk about in a leadership or business context, is mischief. And so I love the way that you have defined it and how we have discussed it.
Well, I wonder, and I don't have the answers here, but we can brainstorm this quickly. Who represents mischief, and in a successful way? And I think the first person who comes to mind is Steve Jobs, or Steve Jobs. I don't know how you describe him, pronounce his name over there. But I saw a meme recently, and it had Steve Jobs' office, which was complete chaos with him in it. And who's the guy who took over from him, who runs Apple now? And Tim Cook's office was like this very neat place. I don't know the guy, but and Steve Jobs had this chaos, and Einstein also worked in chaos. And that great quote, you see it all over the internet, of if he said, if having an untidy desk means having an untidy mind, what does an empty desk mean? And I like that, because he was taking the quote and saying, I accept it. All right. Yeah, my mind is untidy. My work is, I have to have this thing going on, and if you have an empty desk, he's just saying, well, if you go stick with that metaphor, you've got an empty mind. And most artists, you look at any artist studio, I've seen pictures of you in your doing your painting. You're not wearing freshly laundered jumpsuit, with very neat creases down it. You're wearing a paint spattered. What is it called? Overalls. They're kind of overalls, aren't they? Yeah. So you're asking, what does it mean to a CEO? Well, let's have a look. Richard Branson, he's not particularly neat, is he? And he made a reputation out of only wearing jumpers to business meetings.
Mark Cuban, a little bit of mischievous throughout his career.
Yeah. And again, Apple, just having an Apple, not even having the name Apple outside the store. There's mischief all over the place. Look at Leon. I don't know if you have Leon, the fast food company over there. But in a world of find your niche, brand, get your brand perfect and never change it. Or if you change it only in a way that people don't notice. Leon, here we are in block capitals. Here we are in serif with a curved edge. Here we are in sans serif. We're always Leon. It's like going, yeah, all right, we get your brandingness and all your branding protocol and all your branding advice. And here we go. We've got 10 different ways of writing our brand. And we love them all. And we're going to stick them all on the wall. And if you buy something in a paper bag from us, it's going to have this logo on it. If you get a box at the counter, it's going to have this logo on it. So I love that. It's just like saying, we are Leon. We we serve food that we're proud of. We don't need all your tricks to sell it. I think there's probably more mischief in the world than compliance. I mean, what does any agency say when they try and get your work and they're doing advertising? They say we're not like all the others. We're more and basically they're saying we're more mischievous. We're going to be more disruptive. We're going to come in with more left field ideas. That's what that guy Rob Mayhew, who's so successful on LinkedIn, is doing. He's exposing that all the time. He's really mischievous, and that's his whole thing. But he's mischievous in that way of the stand-up comedian, of pointing out the protocol that we all silently agree on and saying, this is nonsense, isn't it? It's really nonsense, and we all know it. Why do we keep doing it? And it's done him an enormous amount of good. People love him for that.
I'm going to have to check that out because I love those gentle exposés. I'd love to end where we started and also bring in the second half of what mischief looks like. So if we could be a little spontaneous now, we have talked about discipline plus surrender plus mischief. And we spoke about how mischief is a core of an uninhibited creative person who really touches people, connects with people, shares with them their authenticity, and builds trust in doing so. We don't usually talk about mischief in business. So what I'd love to do is to leave this conversation today with a certain energy that exhibits, that embodies, that elevates those listening and taps into two things that you and I are known for. I help people discover their strengths through handwriting analysis, and you help teams build, elevate, co-create through music, through comedy, and through finding ways to connect them through movement. So let's combine those two right now. So I asked you to put your handwriting, your signature, which you wrote on the spot, I haven't seen ahead of time, up on the screen, and you should be able to see that now. Okay, so when I look at that handwriting, here's what I'm seeing. I'm seeing in that bottom stroke, that Y, it's so fluid and fast. That's fluency of thought. That's weaving linguistic lassos as you're creating. So your mind is working so fast that once you go, it's hard for you to almost keep up with your hand. You were the kid in school who had your hand up when it came to something that you were passionate about, even before the teacher could finish their sentence. Now, you combine that with that huge loop in your Y. I know it's one particular trait that shows a resourcefulness of creativity, someone who works well with their hands, thinks best with their hands, and movement. That's what that fluency, and it goes straight up, it limp off to the side. That's a belief in yourself when it comes to your creativity. Now, the other trait you have is depth of character, depth of emotion. You feel things, still waters run deep. Emotions you had, even going back 30, 40, 50 years, you still think of, you still feel on a deep level. And that can be a curse and a blessing. It can be a blessing because that's where your creativity flows out of, that level of feeling, that level of depth, that level of accumulated thought. It also can sometimes be a curse because sometimes you forgive, but it's not always easy to forget. And finally, I believe you're a practical optimist. You're an optimist at heart. That T bar on T on your first name, it goes up to the right, and there's no question about that. You're thinking ahead no matter where you are in your life, always believing that you might have to deal with a problem and be realistic about it, but ultimately you believe that something positive will come from this challenge and you'll turn it into an opportunity. Does that ring true briefly before we jump in?
Yeah, I mean, it's remarkable. I've seen you do it for other people. I've seen you do you know what? I don't think I've ever seen you actually do the analysis. I've seen pictures of you and movies of you talking to people and them going, but I've never actually experienced it. And it's like, I mean, it wasn't like, oh yeah, you're right there, but you're wrong there. You're right there, but you're wrong there. Or it's a little bit. It's completely accurate. It's remarkable. Really remarkable. If I hadn't known, I'd have thought, yeah, you've really researched me deeply and you've applied it to my signature. But I only did that signature 30 seconds ago. So you didn't have a chance to trick me. That would have been really mischievous.
That would be really mischievous. Thank you.
Yeah. So actually, what we have there, we have an example of your discipline, because you've studied and studied and studied this. So that wasn't mischievous. That was just the discipline. But
can we bring some of those ideas in feeling and form as I dance and take us out of this conversation better than we started?
Yeah, certainly. I love it. I'm going to say one thing as a preface is that what you described there, and when you said the blessing and the curse, yeah, the blessing of it is that in being so connected to those feelings of when I was scared, I've been depressed in my life, terrified. I can still remember all that clearly, but I can recognize it as I did today. And I did a gig this morning. Some people I was drawing in, it was actually in a mental health hospital. Some people I was drawing in, and I thought, I can't push you. You just be there. You're safe in this circle, where some of the helpers were feeling safer than some of the clients. And then I started to see them just move a little bit, and then a smile. And then the carers were saying afterwards, I haven't seen her smile for a year. She arrived a year ago. We've never seen her smile. So the important thing, actually, I discovered just whilst doing that, is that once you've got your groove, you don't have to show off much. You just kind of live in the groove. And that is what I try and do with organizations. I say, look, you're all chaotic. If I say at the beginning, play me a solo, it's all crazy. And then by the end, it's like, you don't need to do that. You just got to play the groove from the post room to the boardroom. It's like, dum, 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 dum. That's it. You've helped me define my job even more, Jamie.
And that is Tom Morley,
It's on the tip of my tongue.
drummer,
There's a word for it.
artist, speaker,
Everybody empowered.
and one of the most unique people
It's a commitment
I've ever
to a
known.
cause. You're a star, but
This
without
is Signature Leadership Show.
how come
For
they've never
more
heard of it?
extraordinary voices on leadership,
Dedication.
tune in each
Whatever
week
happened to
and subscribe. This is Jamie Mason Cohen with Tom Morley. Thank you for listening.
the heart of the nation? Whatever happened to the art of? Whatever happened to the art of? Whatever happened to the art of conversation?